Hi everyone, I'm Armine, a UI/UX designer.
And I'm Ita, Chief Marketing Officer at Ucraft, an online website builder. But we're not going to be speaking about website builders today, actually. We are going to be speaking about the art of user onboarding when it comes to UI/UX design, particularly in our constantly changing global environment.
But there can't be any onboarding without a proper UX, so let's discuss it for a bit. We know that the term itself was invented in the 1990s, but did you know that as a concept, UX has actually existed a long time ago? And by long, I mean centuries. A good example of this is ancient China with their feng shui philosophy. Now, feng shui, as all of you might know, means arranging your surroundings in the most optimal and aesthetic way, creating harmony between the individual and the environment.
Yeah, and also ancient Greeks played a huge role in this by incorporating ergonomics into the design process of their surroundings.
Now, even back then, UX was considered to be the interaction between the people and their environment. But how did those people of the old time, like in ancient China or Greece, actually know how to behave in those environments that were created specifically for them? I mean, despite how user-friendly a new concept may seem, every new thing needs to be explained in an understandable way so that the user can get what's going on.
But before that, let's start with the beginning. So it all started, of course, with the World Wide Web, when websites were made exclusively for browsers. And then when W3C came, a new standard was set to code all websites in HTML and CSS.
Now, back then, designers started prototyping their information in tables, creating structural data. Now, those tables can be considered the parent concept of modern UX design. Back then, those applications were very simple, lacked many functions, and admittedly looked very bad. But gradually, they evolved. And with this evolution, modern UX appeared, and everything became more complicated for our users.
So let's take an example of a dictionary. So when you start to learn a new language, you constantly need to look up in the dictionary to check on the new words, like the definition of them, and how to properly use them in a sentence. And the same applies to modern UX. It's not enough to put somehow a logical icon inside your app or product. You also need to cover it up with useful tips on how to use it and how to benefit from it.
Now, this is where one of the most important aspects of modern UX design comes in. Let's talk a bit about globalization. Now, despite what many may say, the lines between cultures are not becoming more blurred. In fact, those differences are more important than ever. And this is not only observed in the IT. I mean, even in our day-to-day interactions, we can see it. For example, even the process of handing over a business card varies from culture to culture. Now, especially if we want to move to different markets, before starting any onboarding, we need to make sure that our UX is customized to the country specifically. In other words, we need to localize. Now, let me list a few key elements that are greatly influenced by cultural perception. First is visual design, the most basic one might say. Let's divide it into two categories: symbolism and colors. Now, symbolism varies from culture to culture, and each culture attaches their own meanings to those symbols. I mean, there have even been cases when historical events have altered those meanings. The same goes for the colors, especially in their metaphorical sense. For example, the color white symbolizes purity in the Western countries, but for the Eastern ones, it actually means grief and mourning. Number two is navigation. Now, it needs to be clear and intuitive for all users, and we always need to take into account that the manner and preferred way of communication varies from culture to culture. Now, the most basic example of this is the direction we read and write in: up and down, left to right, right to left. And number 3 is how we process the information. Now, there are 2 proven ways of this. There's holistic and analytical. Holistic is often found in Eastern countries, is when the users tend to scan the whole page prior to forming any sort of opinion. In this case, our UX needs to be neutral without distracting the user. And the analytical, which is most often found in Western countries, it's when the users actually focus on a single element rather than the whole picture. In this case, the UX needs to be much more structured with emphasis on the element we want the users to focus on. Now, once we get through these 3 points, of course, it's always scary to change your product and adapt it to a new culture, but there is simply no running away from country-specific design, especially if we want to conquer a foreign market.
And when it comes to creating multilingual websites, all you need is necessary tools at time. At Ucraft, we created both multilingual and multi-regional functions, which are great for those countries where there are several official languages. For example, you have an online store, and you have your audience in US and in Canada. So in the US, there are 2 official languages, English and Spanish. And in Canada, there are, again, 2 official languages, English and Spanish. And you want to show them different content. You want to show them different products, different currencies. So with Ucraft's multi-regional support, you can easily show your Canadian users their English and French version of a website, and to American users, their version of English and Spanish.
And it's not just the language. Ucraft actually allows you to change the whole UX of a page depending on the audience it's created for. Think it's better to have certain type of products for one country and whole different ones for another? Go ahead. Want to try different icons? Try it. Think it would be better to have different visuals? Everything is possible thanks to Ucraft's geolocation visibility settings.
Yeah.
Now, taking all of this into account, let's see how we can personalize user onboarding.
Yes, so at last we came to our topic, the art of user onboarding. And I would like to introduce here our growth hacker, Ines. So what does she do? She finds out what needs to be improved in the builder, while also providing our users with lots of different useful information regarding the tool. So it might seem random, but we really wanted to show who is behind the onboarding process at Ucraft. And that's exactly how it should be. The user needs to know that there is a person behind this, and not just a machine forcing you through a process. So every month, Ines and her team help to analyze Ucraft's user base. What works, what remains unclear, and what needs to be improved. And the first thing we realized was that our users needed product tours desperately. And I don't mean the tours that appear during the registration, but after that, for more advanced and complicated features that appear within the product. So we gathered frequently asked questions from our support team and created question-specific product tours inside Ucraft. And of course, it increased our customer loyalty and eventually sales.
Now, remember, first impressions are the key. We must always evolve and improve our onboarding process, and we must always keep in mind that the customer needs constantly change. This is where we introduce another good method of onboarding, which is tooltips. If we are creating a new function, even if we're not going to make a product tour out of it, we must always make a tooltip. And when creating said tooltip, we must always consider the language and the geolocation. Let's say we're creating a set function for a specific country. In that case, we need to only notify the interested party.
So the next step is email onboarding. At Ucraft, we completely redesign it, keeping in mind all the different kinds of users and writing personalized and, most importantly, useful messages for them, avoiding any hint of spam content. So email marketing is still an impressive tool to communicate with your clients during every step of the consumer life cycle, whether you are a thriving SaaS company or an up-and-coming small business. And we think that email marketing is more than just clicking send. So when a user sees an email in their inbox, they should constantly tell that it's from you. Like, the tone of voice should match your overall branding as colors and graphics. So alongside with tooltips and email onboarding, localization of content is also highly important. So we've spoke about this earlier on, about the cultural aspects. So, for example, most businesses are starting their businesses with only one version of a website, UX, and only one language. But as soon as your business starts to grow, you definitely don't want to avoid the people that don't speak your native language, even if it's English. So, for example, at Ucraft, we coded on English for a while, but then we've decided to add our user onboarding in Russian and Armenian, since we're based in Armenia. And also, we've translated our websites into those languages. And we are still continuing that process. We now are translating our website into several languages. And yesterday, we pushed live our new Japanese version, which is available at gp.ucraft.com. So go on and check it.
In conclusion, user onboarding is not just a cool trick that we can use. It's actually a necessity. We need to keep in mind that the era we're living in, the technology is constantly evolving, and our applications are becoming much, much more complex. And the need to localize becomes more in order to improve and go to other markets. And this makes we add new features constantly, and users get constantly confused. I mean, you cannot just dump a user on a dashboard and expect him to figure things out on his own. Usually, they'll just leave. This is why onboarding is absolutely essential. Ucraft has essentially combined the classical ways of user onboarding, such as product tours, tooltips, email announcements, and customer support, and configure them to match each individual buyer persona.
So we understand that there's a lot to perfect, but at least we're on our way there. And even if we think that our builder is simple, we understand that some users might feel lost at certain points. And let me tell you this, even if you have the simplest product on the market, it will seem simple to you because you've created it. And your UX might be also basic because you know it like the back of your hand. But that thoughts are deceitful because it's not about you understanding of the product. It's about the user's understanding. So, thank you.
Thank you.